All right, so our first one is going to be the line goes through the points 2, 1, and 3, 4. So in order to use slope-intercept form, we need the slope and we need a point that goes through our line. We've got 2 points, we need to figure the slope. So if you don't recall, I'm going to label my points. I'm going to call this x1, y1, and this x2, y2. And then I'm going to use the formula for the slope, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Remember, y goes on in the numerator, x in the denominator. So now I'm going to use those values that I identified in my points, and I'm going to plug them into this formula. So y2 is 4. So I'm going to take 4 minus. Before I even look at what y1 is, I'm going to put that minus sign because I am subtracting in the numerator and the denominator. It may end up that I add because I'm going to subtract a negative, but some students, the common mistake that students make is that they don't put this minus sign, they just do 4 and then look at that 1 and put plus 1 because it's a positive 1. We don't want to do that. Always put 4 minus and then go look at what your y1 is, and in this case it's 1. In the denominator, we're going to do x2, which happens to be 3, so I'm going to write 3 minus, and now I'm going to go look at x1, and that is the value 2, so that gives me 3 over 1, which I could just write as 3. So that's the slope. So I have a slope of 3, and now to find the equation, I just need a point on the line. So which point do I want to use, Hadley? Which point? 3, 4. Okay. It won't matter which point you use, you'll get the same answer. So if you wanted to use point 2, 1 with the slope of 3, you should get the same answer as long as both of our maths are correct. So it doesn't matter, you just choose one point and the slope. Okay. So we have our slope. We're identifying x as 3 and y as 4. And then remember, we're going to plug it into this formula, y equals mx plus b, to find b, and then rewrite our equation. All right, so y is 4, m is 3, x is also 3, and we're trying to find the value of b. 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm going to have to subtract 9 from both sides to get b, and b is a negative 5. And so now I'm ready to come back up to this equation, and I'm just going to substitute a number in for b and a number in for my slope. So the final equation is y equals m is 3, x minus 5, because that's what b is. And there's the equation of the line in slope-intercept form that goes through these 2 points. So we're going to identify what's x1, y1, x2, y2. So here's my first point, so I'm going to call that x1, y1. Second point is x2, y2. And I am substituting that information into this. To find the slope. So in the numerator, Caitlin, what am I going to write? What minus what? Well, I'm going to do y2 as this. So negative 1 minus 2. Good. And then in the denominator, Lillian, what are we doing in the denominator? What minus what? Where's x2? What's x2 again? -2 minus, and then you said a -3. Yep. Okay, so x2 minus x1 minus a negative is going to make that positive. So we're going to have a -3 over 1, right? That's our slope. All right, so now, Jasper, what point are we going to use? Which point? You decide. You pick. The second one. Okay, so that means our x is going to be -2. Our y is -1. And remember, we're plugging into this formula, y equals mx plus b, those three values. So that gives me a -1 equals -3 times -2 plus b. And we simplify, -3 times a -2 is 6. And we get rid of that 6 because we want to solve for b. So I'm going to have to subtract 6 from both sides. B equals a -7. Now I'm ready to go back up into the equation and substitute what I know for m and for b to get my final answer. And that's going to be y equals, the slope, m is -3, so -3x minus 7. This first point I'm just going to call x1, y1. Evan, what do I do next? Great, so what's that going to look like? What is y2 minus y1 on top? What am I going to subtract? 1 minus 4, 3 minus 2. So that gives me a -3 over 1. So my slope is -3. Nolan, what's my next step? Okay, so let's look back here. After we found our slope, then we figured an x and a y. And we got that from this point. So you need to pick a point. Which point do we want to use? Do we want to use 2, 4 or 3, 1? 2, 4. Okay. So we're going to use the first point this time, and that's going to give us the value of x equals 2 and the value of y equals 4. And what are we going to plug that into? What's the equation we're using, Gemma, to plug into? Y equals mx plus b. Okay, so Gabby, what am I writing? Plus b. So that gives me 4 equals a -6 plus b. I add 6 to both sides, and b equals 10. So what's my final equation going to be? Jarrett, what's my final equation going to be? Yep. All right, we have one more special. This one's a little different special, so we want to make sure we go over it. Your 2 points are going to be, 2 points are going to be 0, 1 and 1, 1. Abby, first things we need to do are what? Identify x1, y1, x2, y2. Camilla, what's the next thing we're going to do? So what's that mean? Okay. And what do we get there? We get 0 over 1, which is just 0, right? And that's our slope. That's okay. We can have a slope of 0. What do we need to do now, James? We've got our slope. So which point do I want to use? Okay. So that means x equals 1 and y equals 1. Taylin, what am I going to do now? So what is that going to look like? And 0 times 1 is just 0, right? So that's gone, so b equals 1. So, Tyrese, what's our equation going to be? Plus 1. That would be acceptable. You could also, because we know that 0x is just 0, you could just write y equals 1. Both of those are acceptable. Kind of like this one because that helps us if we're graphing. We know we have a 0 slope. But either one is acceptable. Okay? All right. So with the remainder of time, you have an assignment. It's a worksheet, only about 8 problems. So go to your homework log.